Guys, this is one of the most insane ATP 500 lineups I have seen in a while. The first round matchups are ridiculously good, and I can't wait to get into this one because I have no idea who's going to win it, honestly, because there has been a lot of tennis play throughout the year. There's been people who have just come off the US Open, they've won that, then they've gone deep in that tournament, and they've gone into the Davis Cup and the Laver Cup potentially as well. And then they're coming into this tournament in a completely different part of the world. So it could be a very, very random winner, or we could get what we got last year, which was the current number one player in the world, and Jannik Sinner, winning it. And he won it last year and looked impressive. And that was, of course, the start of something special with him going on to a really good end to the year last year and then kicking on this year, winning 2 out of the 4 Grand Slams. Guys, before we get into it, though, remember that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. So, some very, very interesting matchups. Jannik Sinner has Nicholas Jarry in the first round, which is a very tough first round for Jannik Sinner. However, I think he'll get through it. In saying that, Jarry is very dangerous, so do not be surprised if he takes a set off Sinner. I actually wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be too surprised if he beat him. I do still think, though, Sinner will come out on top. Jelena Struff is also another player with really big weapons, and the German plays another big hitting player on wildcard and 3-time Grand Slam champion Stan Wawrinka. I think Struff has a decent chance in this matchup, I have to say, and I think he might get through it. So I'm going to go for Jan-Lennard Struff to, I don't know if it's an upset, I think it's a 50-50 really, but get the win there. Yuri Lehechka plays Pedro Martinez. On a hard call, I have to back Lehechka. Qualifier plays Grigor Dimitrov. We don't know exactly who's going to get through qualifying yet. There's still a round to be played, so go for Dimitrov. And then Andrei Rublev has someone who historically has been an incredible hard-court player in Pablo Carreno Busta. I'm going to go for Andrei Rublev to get through that. Then we've got some interesting matchups here because we've got Dominic Fokina, a very solid Spanish player, but against someone who's just coming off, albeit a final loss, in Zhang Zhizhen. And I actually think the Chinese player is going to get the win here. Then we've got a recently crowned ATP champion in Jerry Shang, and he came out on top, beating Lorenzo Musetti in Chengdan, in the Chengdu Open. And look, we have interviewed him twice, once in Bordeaux with David, and Anthony also interviewed him in Atlanta. And he seems like a very bubbly personality, very welcoming, kind of warm type of person, but young, ambitious, and has a massive game as well. And I do think he's destined for some big things. And, we had Wu Yibing win an ATP title, a couple of years ago now. And Shang is now the second Chinese player ever to do so. You know what? This could be a really, really big catalyst now for the rest of his career. And I'm hoping it is because he's still pretty young and he's got a lot of career left in front of him as long as he stays fit and healthy. And he's got a big game lefty and a lot of variety as well. So I'm going to go with Shang to beat the wild card and carry on that great form. Musetti plays the qualifier, so we'll go for Musetti. And then another incredible first-round matchup. Alexander Bublik versus Flavio Cobolli. I mean, Cobolli's had a really good season. Alexander Bublik, we know what he's about. I'm actually going to go for Cobolli to cause the upset and beat Bublik here. Marijan, I'm going to go to beat Zhu Yi. And then we've got Mannarino and Sonego. Very interesting matchup. I actually think Mannarino is going to frustrate Sonego in that one. And then we've got Monfils and Medvedev. Now, Medvedev has not had the best of few months, I think it's fair to say. He had a decent run, of course, the US Open, but it just hasn't quite, and even at Wimbledon, but the tournaments in between, and it's been a bit of a strange year for him, I think it's fair to say. At the start of the year, he had a 2-set-to-love lead against Jannik Sinner in the Australian Open. If he goes on to win that and win his second slam, the year, I think, could have looked very different for him. Instead, I think, it's been a very solid year, no doubt. And, he still made some deep runs, a final, two semifinals of slams as well on top of that out of the four. Still very, very good. But he hasn't won a title since Rome 2023. So that's nearly a year and a half now. And he was a serial title winner, but that hasn't been the case for quite some time now. So, can he break his duck here in Asia? Maybe Monfils, he's going to love it. The crowd are going to love him as well. He's so explosive. He's having a really good year himself. And, we saw someone like Laver Cup as an exhibition. I get it, but we saw Shelton, beat Medvedev, and that was a pretty surprising win. TFO beat Medvedev. Those types of players you wouldn't normally expect in terms of caliber. In terms of caliber of player, anyway, to beat Medvedev, but Medvedev has managed to get the W against him, and that has been very impressive. So I'm actually going to go though for Medvedev. I think he will win, and I think he's going to pick up a little bit of steam towards the back end of this year now. Hachinov to be a qualified and Cerundolo to do the same. Greek Sport and Kekmanovic. I'm going to go. Ooh, that's a good one. It's a real 50-50. Going to go Kekmanovic. And then we've got one of my good old friends. I mean, he's not really a friend, but I have talked to him quite a few times at Wimbledon in the qualifying and also in the main draw. Giovanni and Petri Pericard playing Carlos Alcaraz. And it's a really good test for the Frenchman to see where he's at. He hasn't played a Jannik Sinner yet, or even like a Medvedev or a Zverev. And I think, he's still very young. He's at a different stage of his career than someone like Alcaraz, of course. But he's got a huge, huge serve, one of the best on tour, if not the best on tour. And there's definitely some areas of improvement in the rest of his game, no doubt. I think it's fair to say. But, it does put him in a pretty good position on a hard court, especially. And I think he needs to put his best foot forward here. I'm not saying that he's going to win, but what I am saying is that, he could potentially get a really, really good, get some really good experience. I think anyway, in my opinion. And I also think that Alcaraz is going to have a bit too much for him in terms of variation, but it'll be interesting to see how Alcaraz does handle the Pericard serve. And I'm just intrigued by the matchup, but I think Alcaraz gets it done. Then we've got round of 16, so I'm going to go for Sinner over Struff. I think the matchup suits him. Dimitrov, Lehechka, I'm going to go for Dimitrov. I've been pretty impressed with his year so far. Lehechka could be dangerous though. Rublev, Zhang, I think Zhang has actually beaten Rublev, if I'm not mistaken, this year. And at home with the crowd, Rublev does like China though. Even the Shanghai Open, Shanghai Masters final last year. I'm going to go for Rublev. And then, this is very interesting. It would be a replay of the Chengdu Open final. Shang versus Musetti. I think Shang will get the win again. I just think, despite Musetti having a very potent one-hander, one of the best on tour, I would say, I do think the heavy topspin lefty ability that Shang is able to bring to the table isn't the most comfortable, even for someone like Musetti, who doesn't seem to be too overawed by the ball getting to his backhand side. But I think just the kick off that side and having to take it shoulder height, and I still don't think it's the optimal scenario for Musetti anyway. Then we've got Kaboli and Marajan. So I'm going to go for Kaboli. Medvedev, Manarino. I think Medvedev will get the win there. I think, Manarino is an older version of the type of player Medvedev is, and a little bit more limited, and I don't think he'll be able to get the W here. Hachinov and Cerundolo. I mean, Cerundolo played really well in the Laver Cup again. It's an exhibition, I get it, but showed some real grit about him and also some real quality ability. And these players actually are relatively similar. Cerundolo's a big server, you might not expect it when you look at him. He's not 6'4", 6'5", but he is a very, very, very good player, in my opinion. And not just on serve, but I think off the ground he's super solid and he really brings a lot to the table. So I'm very interested to see how he gets on. In all honesty, so I'm going to go with Cerundolo to cause the upset, and Alcaraz to beat Kecmanovic for me. Right, quarterfinals. This is where it gets interesting. I'm going to go for Sinner to beat Dimitrov. I think that could be a great matchup, of course. Dimitrov beat Alcaraz, I think it was last year in one of these tournaments, which I can't remember. Rublev Shang. I'm going to go big on Shang. Look, it's a difficult one because sometimes when you win your first title or a title, you can feel a bit fatigued after, etc. I think because it's in China and he's just going to be moving cities, and I think maybe the adrenaline is going to flow and he'll feel okay. And I think he'll get the win against Rublev. I think he'll really take advantage of that backhand of Andre's, which is much improved over his career, but I still don't think it's going to hold up particularly well to Shang. And although in saying that, Rublev's forehand cross is monster, so Shang's backhand is going to have to hold up better than Rublev's, and I think it will. And also the current form, I think we can cater that in. Medvedev to beat Kaboli and Alcaraz to beat Cerundolo. So I've gone for a pretty boring semi-final lineup, to be honest, and I don't know if we'll see this, but I've gone for Sinner and Shang, and I think Sinner will get the win there, and then Medvedev and Alcaraz, and I actually think Medvedev will get the win. You know that. I actually think Medvedev will beat Alcaraz. And I just get the feeling that sometimes when Medvedev loses to Alcaraz, he then kind of manages to somehow figure out something or just something to potentially beat him. And it doesn't happen every time he loses to him, but he does learn. He does learn Medvedev. He does. And he's an extremely intelligent player. So I'm going to go for Medvedev to beat him. And then a Sinner Medvedev final, which would be a match that was played at Wimbledon where Medvedev actually beat Sinner in the quarterfinals. And I think on a hard court, it's a different kettle of fish. And we know how Sinner's been playing. I do think Sinner's going to be fresh. And I actually am going to go for Jannik Sinner to defend his title. I just think he is tactically playing the calendar this year. I don't know if it's deliberate, but he didn't play Lever Cup. Medvedev and Alcaraz did. I do think it makes a difference. I think traveling all the way now from Berlin to China, how they're going to fare, like jet lag, just adapting to new conditions, and it does all make a difference in my opinion. And it's been a long year, so Sinner has had some time off. He hasn't necessarily played every tournament. He won the Australian Open, but then Roland Garros lost in the semis, quarters of Wimbledon. He's taken some breaks in between, in certain tournaments, especially during the clay court swing because of a hip injury. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think he's as war-torn, you might say, as the others. So I'm going to go for Sinner to get the win. Let me know in the comment section below who you think is going to win and why. I'm intrigued. There's some really dangerous people in the draw, of course, and it could definitely be one of those players. It doesn't have to be a Medvedev or a Sinner or an Alcaraz. I'll tell you that much. But you know what? Those guys have been so consistent. It wouldn't surprise me. Thank you very much, guys, and we'll see you very, very soon.